Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back to Inspiration Contagion. This is episode 79. My guest this week is Steve Wolf. Steve is the founder and CEO of Team Wildfire, the latest in his series of problem-solving businesses. He left a 30-year career as a Hollywood special effects coordinator to turn his attention to putting out deadly fires, which we certainly need right now, Steve. My goodness, I moved away from California to the East Coast in North Carolina. And what am I experiencing? Wildfire smokes in North Carolina from Canada. This is crazy.
Yeah, the smoke is chasing you, Holly.
It is chasing me. So first of all, I think it's amazing that you're working on solving this massive problem as we're seeing the temperature turn up all around the world. And
Yep.
before you dive into the questions that I have, what inspired you to do this?
Well, for one, it needed to be done. And for two, I had ideas about how to do it. So that seemed like a good marriage right there. Uh, and I enjoy it too. You know, I like playing with fire. I was a pyrotechnician in Hollywood for 30 years and simultaneously was a volunteer firefighter. And one of the things you do in special effects on movies is you're responsible for making weather, for making rain, wind, falling leaves, smoke, you know, all the things that would happen in real life that we need to film. When I was a volunteer firefighter, I asked the guys, you know, what do you guys need to put this fire out? And they joked. They said it would take a hurricane to put this fire out. And I said, well, actually, in my day job, we do make hurricanes, and maybe we could make one that we could put on wheels and bring it over here and blow this fire out. So that's really where the hurricane on wheels idea came from. And it looked like an exciting adventure and something worthwhile. You know, there's a lot of time that we spend making movies where really the sum good of all of that work, maybe a crew of 250 people employed for 6 months or more, and the whole upshot of it is an hour and a half of entertainment. Well, there's real problems in the world, so I think if we're going to focus that much intention on something, it should be something worthwhile.
Well, and my goodness, we certainly have a timely issue with controlling wildfires today. So it's really fascinating to me. I bet they weren't expecting you to come back with the response of, "Well, I've actually learned how to create hurricanes."
Yeah, well, Hollywood really has some of the most creative people for problem solving across such a wide variety of things. And I think that many people in that industry have skills that would translate very well into other areas.
Well, let's hope that your secret sauce, which we're going to talk about in a second, maybe you can pull those people over into bigger causes beyond just the Hollywood red carpet. So, with that, I want to ask you, what makes you such an inspirational leader, or what would you say is your secret sauce?
I don't know if I'm an inspirational leader. I know I inspire myself, and I know what inspires me. But I would say my secret sauce is enthusiasm, that I get up to do this thing that I feel driven to do. It wakes me up and says, you know, get up, Steve, we got stuff to do. It drags me out of bed, and it makes me stay focused at this task for sometimes 16, 17 hours a day. Uh, I usually want to get 8 hours of sleep, but at 6 a.m., there's some idea popping in there and says, come on, get to the computer, get writing, get calling, get whatever, go to the shop, build something. And I find myself at work and off until 1 a.m. So that's not sustainable. I understand that. But a, a level of effort beyond what is sustainable is often called for at the startup level of a company. The founder or CEO is expected to be the solid rocket booster engine that musters all this energy and pushes it all up and tries to, you know, break the holds of gravity or inertia. And that's what it takes to get something launched. Once it's launched, then other personalities are better suited for managing it. It becomes a management problem rather than an inaugural effort. So
Yeah.
I look forward to transitioning the company to the point where other people can jump in and do more of it.
I love the metaphor of a rocket ship taking off for starting a business, because think about like the preparation, the time, the energy that goes into that rocket launch successfully and safely taking off, and the metaphor of how really often that weight falls on the CEO and the leader of the organization. And I can tell you right now, like, you're definitely an inspiring leader. Like, that metaphor alone is very inspiring. The fact that you feel driven and called to this problem that you want to solve, and you're working those long hours, that's inspiring. And you also recognize it's not sustainable, which I find to be inspiring, because there's so much havoc in the entrepreneurship world and startup world around imbalance and things that just are not realistic and not sustainable long term. And so I am sending you good vibes for transitioning that smoothly, so that you're not kind of in this burst of energy at the beginning for too long, and that you find really smart people that help you with that transition.
Well, there's a great expression that says a change of aggravation is like a vacation. And so I don't imagine that my hours or input will diminish greatly, but as the nature of it changes, that will reinvigorate more enthusiasm. When I move from this role of fundraising to get my seed round closed to the next round of the innovation, what is the fourth iteration of our product going to look like? Who's going to manufacture it? How many jet engines are going to be on it? I'll get to focus on other things. And so there's so many areas that you can focus on when you're starting a business that simply jumping from one to the other is sometimes perceived as a break.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point too, is that in that startup phase, whether it's an official startup or you're a solopreneur getting started, there is that seed funding, the fundraising momentum, there's just starting to build revenue so that you can survive. Regardless of what startup or what phase of business you are in early days, you have to also remember that even once you onboard team members, it's not like the work stops. It's just different. And then
Right.
you're just constantly making sure that you're providing your team with what they need, and making sure that you're still walking the talk of that incredible, inspiring leader. And I'm actually not going to ask you the second question, because you already answered it when I asked you the first one. So we're going to move straight into peak performance,
Wow.
right? You just read my mind. So I wanted to ask you, how do you define peak performance, and how did you arrive at this definition?
I don't know that I have a definition yet to have arrived at, but for me, peak performance means two things. One, you're doing the best that you are capable of doing, and two, that the best that you're capable of doing is adequate to the task that you're trying to solve. So the world has no use for people who are doing the best they can do if the best they can do isn't solving the challenge and the problem that they're there to be solving, right? I don't want my house to be on fire and the fire truck can't make it up the driveway. Hey, we're doing the best we can. Who cares? If you don't get the job done, to me, that's not peak performance. The more relevant part for me of what peak performance is what do you have to do for you so that you can do your best work? Does that mean that you need to get enough sleep? Does that mean you need to surround yourself with people who encourage and inspire you? Does that mean that you have to manage your diet a certain way? Does that mean that you have to exercise a certain amount? Does that mean you have to enrich your brain with reading, podcasts, movies that inspire you? What do you have to do to be your best you? And if you're not doing that, then you're robbing your company of its most valuable asset, which is your leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good reminder for folks who are listening, that peak performance is very personal, right? And so to set yourself up and have that firm foundation where you are set up to be 100% the best version of you that day takes so much intention and so much inner work. And for some people, they need 4 hours of sleep. Not me. I need at least 7 or 8 hours of sleep. And my friends know when I do not get that amount of sleep, it is super clear. And some of us need meditation and spiritual work. And,
Yeah.
it's just so different and unique to each person. And as Steve was just saying, you as the leader have to show up as the best version of yourself, even when shit's hitting the fan, even when things are falling apart, even when,
Especially when.
yeah, exactly. They're going to look
Yeah.
to you first. And if it's a mess and you don't have it together, boy, it's going to fall apart even faster.
Well, the best way you can have your team be there for you, in my experience, is to be really transparent with your team. If you're feeling overworked, say, "Hey, I'm feeling overworked." Uh, if you're tired, let your team know, because they want to support the mission, and they can only do that when you're honest about where you're failing or where you're feeling your weak spots, so that they can jump in. And that's the whole purpose of having a team. Otherwise, you just do it yourself. And there are endeavors where you can do that. If you want to be an oil painter, and it's you and your canvas and your brushes, you don't need to have a collaborative effort. But if you're trying to make a movie or start a big business, you're going to need a lot of people, and you have to really explore what your personal needs are for each person, as well as what your professional contributions are, so that you can help cover for each other. And that's, I think, what makes a strong team.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder, because even when we do our best to set ourselves up with that firm foundation and to be successful, not every day are we at 100%. Let's be real. Life happens. I'm getting over the stomach flu after 48 hours of delays from airlines that I won't mention the name. They are not achieving peak performance. Let me just tell you that. But anyhow, you have to also give yourself some grace and lean on your team through authenticity and trusting your team, which hopefully you build the culture, which we're going to talk about later, well enough that they want to support you. And if you're an inspiring leader that's really well grounded, that will certainly happen. But I just like to remind people, especially a lot of our leaders and CEOs and startup founders, they put so much pressure on themselves and they think that they have to be 100% every day. And that's not realistic. And in fact, for whoever is listening that needs to hear this, you are human. You are not superhuman. We're not in the movies. You're human. And it is okay to have days where you're 20%. That's why you have a team. But obviously, you want to set yourself up for success as much as possible, but be kind to yourself as well.
And I know you're talking to your audience when you say that, but even just hearing it feels good.
Yes, yes.
Just you're only human. You can only do so much. Perhaps compared to what other humans do, it does look like superhuman effort, and it often does feel like superhuman effort. Um, but you got to replenish that bank account at some point, or you're going to be in overdraft. So
Yeah,
one of the things that I think is helpful is knowing what the temporal scope of the exertion is. Uh, if you had just run 26 miles, you'd say, I'm done. This is it. I can't do this. But if I say, look, just another zero point 0.2 miles, and you finish the marathon, you say, okay, I could sustain this knowing that there's an end to it. Uh,
absolutely.
so, yeah. And then doing the same thing at the micro level in the course of your workday. You're putting in 110%, calling, faxing. Okay, not faxing anymore. LinkedIning, pitching this, pitching that, trying to take advantage of every opportunity that comes up during the day. It's a lot of output, a lot of energy. Uh, but if you say, okay, you know what, I'm going to do this, but at 8 o'clock, I'm clocking out. I'm going to take 2 hours. I'm going to have dinner with my family, and then if I feel like going back to it, I will. But
Yeah.
putting some parameters around the business. And what I've found is that doesn't short the business. It actually helps the business, because when I take that break, even if once an hour I just sit and breathe for a moment, when I come back, I'm coming back a lot stronger and a lot more centered.
It's so funny because before we started our interview, we were making sure that everything looked great. And I asked Steve, "Do you feel grounded and centered?" And he took a deep breath and he was like, "Okay, I'm ready." So, what you're seeing here live is what you get in real life as well. And it's so important just to remember to breathe throughout the day and celebrate your wins throughout the day. Like, stop and take a 5-minute break to have your happy dance for making a sale and tell those people that are cheering you on that you've had a big win, as well as when you're not feeling well, giving yourself more breaks and leeway throughout the day. Now, I also want to ask you because not everything goes perfectly in the startup world. In fact, I'd say it's a hot mess and a windy path to success.
Sure.
What are some of the challenges and obstacles that you've faced specifically with your latest startup, and how have you overcome those?
Well, I would say how I am overcoming them. That they're not all the overcoming is not done yet. Um, Defining what your vision for your project is, defining the scope of it, communicating that to other people in a way that inspires them so that they want to join your mission, soliciting financial aid so that you can finance your venture and move to the next step, securing your ideas in terms of IP, writing patents, filing those patents, having good lawyers. There's a lot, and there's an opportunity for failure. At every step of the way. So you really do owe yourself a pat on the back for each thing that you get done, but don't spend too long doing that because those aren't the things that you put in your mission statement. Those are just necessary steps. So, for me personally, what I'd like to see is that robotic hotshots. Hotshots are the guys who they drop into fires to go put them out. That robotic hotshots fight wildfires, not humans, and that as a result of that, I get to stop reading about firefighters dying every week. 2 young firefighters died in Canada in the last week. 2 firefighting pilots died in Greece yesterday. And to me, that's such a tragedy. Uh, for the people who died, not so much, right? Because then, it's just cut uh, into production. But for their families and for their coworkers and for the things that they didn't get to do, it really is tragic to me. Uh, and I think about, little kids who grow up without a parent now because for some reason we were pitting humans against infernos. And if I described the physical situation of a fire, if I told you, hey, there's this place, it's 1200 plus degrees, it's full of smoke and toxic fumes, you want to go? It's like,
No.
no, humans shouldn't be there. Maybe we send, a robot to that planet to explore it that's made for those conditions, but it would be a suicide mission for people to go there. And yet we keep throwing people into that. And so to me, that's archaic and tragic. So yes, I celebrate the little wins. Hey, we got our IP filed. Hey, we got a lead investor for our round. But that's not the mission. Like the mission is get people out of fires and let robots do the work with innovative technology. So micro time for celebration. Only celebrate as much as you need to give yourself the inspiration to go start tackling, you know, chore number 943.
I like that. You have to set a timer for your celebration and get right back to it. And I
Right.
approve of that message. That makes sense to me, especially with such a big mission that's so important in saving lives. I totally get that. I can see why that mission and painting that very clear vision for folks is, I mean, that's hard to disagree with. We've seen so many tragedies over the years. It's becoming an astronomically more challenging issue that, for especially wildfires, it doesn't make sense to
Yeah.
have humans fighting that. Now, I do
And
want
it's
to
not
kind
it's,
of
it's not just the loss of firefighter lives. It's the tremendous carbon emissions from these fires, the astronomical amount of heat released into the atmosphere from these fires. I calculated that in the last month, the Canadian fires released 120 trillion BTUs of heat. That's the amount of heat used to heat every home in America for 30 years. So if we've been releasing gases that are holding in the heat from the earth, that's what we call a blanket, and we make heat under that blanket, we could only expect that things are going to get hotter. And so I think it's probably no coincidence that releasing 120 trillion tons of heat coincides with us experiencing the hottest month on the planet in recorded history.
Yeah, I was gonna say it definitely is a heat wave all around the world, and
Yeah,
that's part of
well,
why we had delays with flights, and it's
right. If you turn
affecting.
off the stove in Canada with 900 fires burning there, perhaps the heat can dissipate and we wouldn't be seeing so much of it.
Yeah. Well, with the fact that you have such a lofty vision and an important one, what are some of the things you're doing early on in your startup to create that culture of peak performance and help them stay that long track for making this successful?
I think it's a matter of good recruiting. Um, be clear about what your message is, and then allow people to come to you who resonate with that message. Because if the mission is as important to them as it is to you, you don't have to spend any time getting them excited about it. You don't have to maintain their interest. They come in because they have personal reasons for them that make achieving this mission as important to them as it is to you. And so at that point, it just becomes a matter of working collaboratively. Uh, we have a shared vision. And so my co-founders are, a rescue chief, a wildfire commander, uh, financial folks, who have firefighters in their family, folks in California who've, lost homes or are breathing the smoke. So if you are working with people who are touched by the problem, we don't have to spend a lot of time on motivation. We can get onto tactics and strategy.
Yeah, that's so important because when there's value alignment and vision alignment at the personal level, there is nothing you can't train that.
No,
You can train these other skills, but in terms of where the person's heart is and how excited or inspired or motivated they are to help achieve that shared vision, that is something that I talk all the time with my consulting clients about is making sure there's an alignment with the vision. And if they don't see a personal alignment to the overall vision and mission, of course, that's not going to be a fit. I would much rather hire somebody who shares my vision of spreading inspiration and healing by helping business owners do that effectively through this ripple effect, healing communities, than hire somebody who does not share the same values and vision as me, but they might be a rock star at the skills that I'm hiring for. Like, of
right.
course, like we said, peak performance is them achieving and being adequate at their job. I'd rather have somebody who's adequate versus a rock star at their job, but shares the vision because they're going
Yeah.
to stay.
And just because they share the vision doesn't mean they should share your sense of the tactics and the strategies that you're going to use to get there. My partners and I disagree all the time on how we should go about something, on what the right order of things is, on what we should be spending money on, what we shouldn't. Um, and I look for people who tell me that my strategy is not a good idea, just as a way to make sure that I'm not leaving holes in there that I'm not aware of. So I think that kind of healthy pushback is great. And having diverse opinions on the team is something that you should strive for, not avoid. And a lot of people will not hire people who don't agree with them. But then that's just like having another one of them. And how does that increase the diversity of your thought content within the company?
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people, I think that the vision that they have in their head is they want like minions where they can like just duplicate themselves, like the movie Multiplicity. But if you
Yeah.
saw that movie, it didn't work out well because they weren't really true copies. And so, yes, of course, you want smart people. You want people that are vision aligned, but you also want people that are strong and confident enough and smart enough that when they don't agree with where you're going, they are going to speak up and share their opinion.
Oh,
And
yeah.
hopefully, you're a smart enough leader that you'll listen.
Yeah. I mean, I hear that from my co founders a lot. Yes, yes, I hear what you're saying with this. Now let me push back against that. Have you considered it from this point of view? And then we have a give and take, and and that's got to be a fair centering of our views so that everybody is not only aligned with the mission, but aligned with the strategy for how we get there.
100%, 100% agree. Now, I know your early days, and I want to ask you for now, what have you done to optimize your customer experience? And if you're not in the customer phase yet, your sponsorship experience?
We aren't in the customer phase in terms of selling, but we're very much in the customer phase in terms of soliciting early ambassadors, supporters. Uh, when I started Team Wildfire 3 years ago, I had like 16 connections on LinkedIn. I have over 10,000 now. And that's because I've made a deliberate effort every day to reach out to people in the market who are experts, who are hotshots, who are firefighters, who are retired firefighters, who have wildland experience, who have management experience, in the fire service, who retired from Cal Fire as captains. I mean, anybody who could be in that intellect bank for me is now in my circle. And I brought these people in very early. I said, this is my idea. Is this stupid? Okay, if it's not stupid, what do you think it would look like ideally to you? How would this product be most usable for you? And it's really great when you're talking to people who are retired, especially because they know you're not trying to sell them on something. What you're doing is you're giving them an opportunity to put back into the mix the experience of their, and their wisdom, how they would have liked for things to have gone, or based on their 30 years in the field, what they would recommend that you do differently from what they experienced before. Where do they see holes in the market? Where do they see holes in the strategy? Where do they see holes in the product range that's available to them? And really let them get their fingerprints on that early. So um, my eventual paying customer journey is going to be very much modeled and designed by people who've trodden that path before. And I think that's going to be very helpful.
Amazing. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think it's very wise that you've already built that base of support. You have the knowledge, you've spoken to the people that are the experts, because then it's going to be a no-brainer and very easy to relate to your customer base once you are officially ready and you're out of that fundraising phase and
It
ready for
also was
sales.
it also was very helpful, it turns out, though, in the fundraising. Because when I went to our lead investor and he said, well, who have you spoken with? How do I know you have a product market fit? I could say, well, call this guy. He's the superintendent of hotshots for the Forestry Service. Call this guy. He's the leading manufacturer of, forestry equipment. Whatever. All these people that I had been speaking with over the years now were able to come to bat with as our investors were doing their due diligence, making sure that this wasn't just some pipe dream that we thought was a good idea, but nobody else did. So, even just in the last week, those allies, have really paid off, really come to bat for us.
Yeah, I imagine also that some of those allies, while they might not be able to invest at maybe a high investment level, but I imagine a lot of those people would also be potential investors into the product because they believe in the mission and the vision, which is
Sure.
also great.
And or in the testimonial range, that
Yeah.
me calling on the head of technology at Cal Fire is going to mean much less than the person who had that job 10 years ago calling that person to say, hey, I've been talking to these kids who are doing this thing. They're onto something. Would you take a meeting with them? I think that's much more likely to result in a meeting than me cold calling.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this is why it's so important to build that community, build those relationships so that it's easier to open those doors. So you have those warm prospects, you have those warm leads, and you've done your due diligence, which is so important in the fundraising and seed campaigning levels of startups. So if you're listening to this, listen to Steve's wisdom, do the same thing that's relevant for your product, your service, your nonprofit, whatever that is. Now we're going to switch questioning just a little bit. We're going to go to the show me the money part of the show. We're going to talk about revenue. Can you share an example in your experience of starting this particular project of where you left money on the table and what you did to fix it?
I haven't left any money on the table yet, um, and I don't expect to. Um, I'm offering a product slash service that doesn't exist yet, and therefore how it prices out is TBD. Uh, so you have to think, what does this product do relative to what other products that do something similar, and how does the pricing compare? So we might say an airplane could come, drops red sludge on a fire, and put out 500 feet of fire. They would bill $80,000 for that. Therefore, the unit metrics on that would be $160 per foot to put out fire. So then could I go to a customer and say, I could put that fire out for $10 a foot, and I can do a whole lot more feet within the day because I'm not spending all day fighting gravity and leaving the scene to go refuel for an hour and a half and then come back to a whole new fire, right? We could stay on station all day and maybe put out 10 or 15 miles of fire for 250 grand. So the price per foot, would be much cheaper. And also the labor savings of having this machine go do that thing, if that's going to save them $10 million a day in labor, maybe we say, well, we'd like 5 of that. We're going to split the savings with you. You'll come out ahead. We'll come out ahead. So a lot goes into that. And I might have to give away the product at first just to get people to use it. And that's
Yeah.
fine too, right? Doesn't bother me. That's just part of the cost of sales, especially in an industry where we're going to be selling to fire folks. So 2 things I learned about selling into the fire community. One, they'll only listen to another firefighter. And that's why it was essential that I have fire chiefs as co-founders. And 2, they have to see it themselves. It's a show me audience. I don't care. They might tell me that your machine put out fires in Boulder. This is Southern California. We have different trees. We have different grass. I need to see that it works here. And someone 30 miles away might say, oh, well, yeah, sure, it works in LA, but it doesn't work in Sacramento until I see it. So I expect a lot of roadshow, a lot of demo time to go into the sales process. But I also think that once people see it, they'll feel like there's nothing else quite like it.
Yeah. So you haven't left money on the table yet, but you're also preparing for the fact that it might be necessary to leave some revenue on the table for your audience because you've done such due diligence and research on your market and your audience. So I'm glad that you're preparing for that in the fundraising phases and
And I
you're
don't think
ready.
of that as leaving money on the table. I think of that as part of the marketing expense.
Hmm. Yeah, it's an investment in the mission and vision, and it's just like any company when you're first getting
Sure.
started. I recently had a speaker agency that's brand new come to me and they said, "Hey, let it join our speaker agency. We charge this much per month." And I'm like, "Well, how long have you been doing this?" "We're brand new." "I'm not paying you."
Right.
I'm like, "How about
You
you
say,
come
I will
back to
give you a
me?"
percentage of every gig that you get for me,
Yeah,
but
exactly. I'm happy to
right,
do that, but I'm not paying you up front. And so
right.
we actually ended up negotiating like a 6-month agreement where they get a percentage for whatever they book me on, but I'm
There you
not
go.
paying an upfront cost. So that is the cost of doing business. You're the first person who's come on and has not left revenue on the table. So we might have to revisit this in the future and see how you answer in the future.
Well, it's easy to not have left any revenue when I have no revenue. So maybe when I have some, I'll make some mistakes with it.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
sure I will.
yeah,
Um, making mistakes is how you learn. And in fact,
absolutely.
I don't call them mistakes. I just say things we learned from.
Absolutely,
You know,
absolutely. What would you say is the next shiny object related to this current project or something else that you would like to turn into a revenue stream?
the next shiny object is closing this round and then using that money to go build an MVP of my biggest variant of the technology, which is a 50-ton truck equipped with jet engines, a mist injection chamber, massive water tank that can climb mountains and go blow out fires. And that will be very exciting for me when I see that first one, come off the factory line or out of the prototype shop, more realistically, and see what it does. And then we'll start to iterate. We'll say, wow, it's putting out way too much water, or the mist particles are too big, or what really should the mist particle size be for ideal wildfire suppression? Does anyone know? And then we'll find out, oh, gee, nobody knows. This is an area of research that we could do. So we are partnering with the Oak Ridge National Lab in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they're doing some core research for us on answering some of these basic science questions that will be necessary to be more efficient at wildfire suppression.
Well, this is not related to my typical questions, but why do you think nobody's ever tried to tackle this? Like, it seems to me it's insane we haven't addressed this sooner.
I think part of it is, is who is addressing it, and to take nothing away from them, it's just not the right question for the right audience. If you have guys who are really great at, unloading hose and pulling it out there and firing up the pump and spraying water on the fire, that's a vital skill set. I'm so glad that we have brave people who do that. But that's a very different skill set than answering the technical questions of what's the ideal droplet particle size for fire suppression. That's something for chemists, physicists, engineers. And so the industry really has to have better cross-pollination between engineering, between robotics, between physics, between chemistry, and the guys who use the technology. And I think that they will benefit each other tremendously.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is like for people listening, they're like, oh, he's trying to take away firefighters' jobs. Not at all.
Not
Like,
at
we're not
all. No.
replacing, firefighters that are going into buildings and homes, et cetera. We're talking about wildfires. And
Actually, I mean, I wouldn't draw the line there necessarily for the purpose of job saving. Running into burning buildings is also dangerous. Daddies go to work to put out building fires that don't come home at the end of the day. That's tragic too. If we had a technology that could go in and do that, super. What little kid wouldn't like to have their parent not be put in mortal danger? So that's not the reason to do or not do something just because, you're worried about how it'll impact jobs. The technology has to be supervised. It has to be deployed. People have
yeah.
to operate the robots. People who've been in fires and have the experience of knowing how to put them out are going to be the most valuable source of information about how to do it with the robot. Except that the robot can do it from places that a person couldn't. So it'll open up more options. But our goal is, not to displace anybody, but to hire all those people and their experience and their knowledge, and then put that into the robotic or AI based system, and pay those people, triple what they're earning now.
Yeah, and that's the thing too is that a lot of people think that when we change an industry or we bring in technology or AI, it's bad because it means a job loss. And the problem is usually it doesn't mean that. It simply means different types of jobs while utilizing the skill set that they've already spent years or decades building. So
Yes.
it's not displacing the expertise that they have, it's just replacing it with better skills and giving them better things to combat these fires more successfully without damage and risk and death and all these crazy things. So I commend you for what you guys are doing, and I hope that you're able to hit that next level. And please send me a note when you have that first prototype come off the line.
Yeah, I will. I'll you'll see it posted on my LinkedIn page immediately.
Amazing.
Um, yeah, and it's, you said you hope you get to see it, but uh, I could sit here and hope for it all day, and that's not going to make it happen, right? It's taking the steps every day to align your vision with what you're doing each day, and over time you make progress, and that progress adds up to be something meaningful.
Oh, I'm not I have no doubt that you're gonna be successful with this. I'm
Me
saying when
neither.
it happens, you tell me.
Yeah, there you go. I'll definitely tell you.
Yeah, not if, I said when.
Yeah,
Um,
you'll watch it on CNN.
ooh, I love it, amazing. I'll be like, "He was on my podcast."
Yeah,
This has
I know
been
her.
Yeah, this has been an
Yeah.
incredible interview. We're going to wrap up with 2 rapid fire questions, and
Okay.
then I will make sure everybody knows how to find Steve and Team Wildfire. What is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
If there's something that's important to you to do it and don't listen to anybody who says you can't. Your
Sage
vision
wisdom.
is going to be what directs your life. And in the long run, you don't want to regret having listened to people who underrated your ability to achieve your goal.
Yeah, let those naysayers fuel you instead of stop you. And then, what is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
The legacy I'd like to leave behind is 3 happy sons, um, a world in which wildfire is no longer uh, such an unmanageable threat, that we have a response system where when the satellite detects the fire, it sends the robots and they put it out, and people don't have to breathe so much smoke. Uh, but more than that, the legacy of just inspiring people to do what I have done, not so much in, that they go into wildfire or whatever. I care about that, but that if they have a problem that they identify with, if something resonates with them, like, go fix it. Get out there and do it. The worst that'll happen is you'll figure out how not to do it, and then someone else will come and figure out from what you learned, how to do it better. But
Amazing.
stop at nothing.
I like that. Stop at nothing and stop asking for permission. Just do it. All right. So how can you follow Steve? I will have his LinkedIn profile in the show notes as well as the YouTube link. Also, it's teamwildfire.com. That's not hard to remember, but it will also be in the show notes. Is there anything else you'd like to just add at the end here for how folks can get more involved in Team Wildfire?
Yeah, teamwildfire.com is the website. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. If you think this is inspirational and you have something to add, jump in. I value everybody's 2 cents. If you want to invest, I'm not allowed to say that because, I can only speak with qualified investors. But if you have friends and family in the fire service and you think that this is something that they should know about, certainly send them our way or send them to the website, because we're trying to amass an enormous knowledge base and then use that to make this job safer for people.
Amazing. Thank you so much for what you're doing. And thank you so much for taking the time to share this with my audience and with the world. And for my listeners, I will see you on the next episode of Inspiration Contagion. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you so much, Holly.
Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.